Thank you for being with us today for this extraordinary program, this first day of our international working group for the organizations caring for the families of military and conflict deceased. We are so honored to have our next guest with us, Ms. Acacia. Thank you for being with us from the IFRC and in Copenhagen and the Center for Psychological Support, Psychosocial Support. We look forward to hearing more about the work that you do and particularly about building resilience. This is so important. For your awareness, we have organizations with us in the session today from Iraq, Afghanistan, Nigeria, Nepal, New Zealand, from across the globe, from Paris, France, from Istanbul, Turkey, Washington, D.C., and many other places. So we look forward to learning from you and just thank you for being with us. It's an honor to have you. Oh,
sorry, this is the first thing you always do wrong. Unmute yourself. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much. I couldn't get my headphones and my mic to work today for some reason, so I hope you can hear me. Does the sound work all right for you? Thank you. So my name is Ia Susanne Acacia, and I am working with the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. And we do have a knowledge center for mental health and psychosocial support. So when our center was formed about 30 years ago after a huge ferry disaster in between Denmark and Norway, it was found that people did not so much need all kinds of material support. Yes, they had lost things on the ferry, lives were lost, but it was more psychosocial support. In those days, it was decided that it was too provocative, so to speak, to call it psychological support. But the full generic term nowadays is mental health and psychosocial support, MHPSS, and we do cover both. I'm a technical advisor, and it's so interesting when you mention all these names. Country is funny because I have been working as a delegate, meaning I've been sent out for Danish Red Cross and Federation to Pakistan, Nepal, Afghanistan. I've been working in Syria. I've been working in Lebanon, Jordan, many countries in Africa, Central African Republic, Mali. Just finished a program in Mali recently. But nowadays I don't travel so much. I used to travel so much that I don't want to see another airport. You know the feeling. I've been asked to give you an introduction, and this is a bit of what should I say? This is a boring part. So because the Red Cross can be a mystery. And just to let you know, and this is how I usually do when I teach, I don't use PowerPoints, apologies. The Red Cross and the Red Crescent movement is three things. It's actually, first and foremost, the ICRC. So when was it founded? It's an old organization. It was founded in 1863. Henri Dunant, who was a Swiss businessman, was traveling, and there was a war going on between Switzerland and Italy, and there were lots of bodies. Nobody tended to the dead. So actually, we're born out of the battlefield. So he organized on the spot that he and other people would help. So they had a church where they would tend to the wounded. When he came back to Switzerland, he founded the Red Cross with 4 other businessmen. So ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, is actually different from IFRC, where I work. So let me explain to you. So this is, it's private, you could say. It's not open, it's not democratic in the way that IFRC is, but it's still very important. They work a lot in war countries. I've been working with them in many places. They have lots and lots of programs, rehabilitation after amputation. They do prosthetics, they do visits, they do exchange of prisoners of war, all that kind of thing. And they actually, when I was in Syria, they actually also held lots of trainings for all the rebel groups, including Al-Qaeda, no, not Al-Qaeda, sorry, all these different groups, teaching them about humanitarian law, international humanitarian law. So it's about what are the rules of war. So IFRC was then founded, and that's the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, right after the First World War. And it was actually the American Red Cross War Committee who took the initiative. So a couple of countries then founded the Red Cross IFRC. And in order to become well, we have three components: the ICRC, and next we have the national societies. So we just heard about Iraq, and that would be the Iraqi Red Crescent. So a national society needs to be founded, needs to be recognized by ICRC, then can become a member of IFRC. And just for your information, very often people will ask, it's the national society who decides whether it's a Red Cross or a Crescent. So you do have Red Cross in many Muslim countries, like Indonesia, the biggest Muslim population in the world. They have the PMI, the Red Cross. Mali, Croix Rouge Malienne, because it's part of the old Francophone countries. One thing that's very different from like what you are doing is that we have to, in order to be recognized, we have to be part of the national laws, and we have to be auxiliary to the government. So we do have a specific mandate giving the Red Cross or Red Crescent National Society a role and a mandate to support whenever there is a crisis. But we're independent, so we can say no. Governments can ask us to do things that we don't want to do. In Denmark, and I heard there was a fellow Dane here, so and yeah, that's a pink. Yeah, that's you in pink. Wonderful. So in Denmark, for instance, we have been asked by or tasked by the government to support different functions. It could be to run centers for asylum seekers. And right now, I'm actually being asked with other volunteers. I also volunteer, of course, to go out and support the mobile corona testing by being psychosocial support team leader. So if you ask me, what is a Red Cross Red Crescent? It's a Red Cross Red Crescent. It's not an NGO. It's not an INGO. And we are the biggest humanitarian organization in the world. So it's quite fascinating to work in, but also much more complex in the sense that you can't just do whatever you want to do because there's so much politics involved. Recently, there's been a huge, not debate, but a good thing. There's been, because every 4th year, all the national societies, ICRC, IFRC, meet with the governments who are signatories to the Geneva Conventions. And they have all signed, not a pledge, but a resolution of supporting mental health and psychosocial support in situations of war, conflict, and whenever there's humanitarian needs. So there's a huge push right now for mental health and psychosocial support. So that took already 8 minutes of my time, and I knew it because it's so complex to understand. So let me go on, talk about psychological first aid. So what we do at the PS Center is actually to produce training materials. We also co-chair the Interagency Standing Committee on Mental Health and Psychosocial Support, which sets all the guidelines that we all need to follow, and all organizations can actually become members. So it's a very good and interesting thing to be part of if you're involved in humanitarian work. So we produce training materials, we produce books, we produce a lot. And I heard talk about children because I've joined a bit in advance. So I just want to tell you about this program that, that I've also been working with, Children's Resilience Program. I've been working with it in Pakistan after SWAT, in Swat Valley after Taliban. And it's an amazing program. You can run it in school, out of schools. You run it for children, and you can run it for children who've been abused. You can run it for children who are armed conflict and wars. And we've done it in Syria, we've done it in Jordan, and the results are absolutely staggering. So it teaches children life skills, so they understand what is happening to them and they understand the situation. We've also done back in school during COVID-19 and lots of other things. Remote psychological first aid. Back to PFA. PFA is the abbreviation of psychological first aid. So this is a training manual. No, this is not the training manual. This is the book on PFA. Psychological first aid is not new. There are many definitions. So if you ask me about a definition, you can find several. We have created in the Red Cross Red Crescent our own because we support people over the lifetime. WHO has very good training materials, but it's more tailored to emergencies, acute phases of emergencies. You can actually be born into a Red Cross hospital. You can die in a Red Cross hospital. You can be in a support group run by the Red Cross. You could be in a prison and supported by the Red Cross. I took my mother to the hospital, and you have people helping who are in their Red Cross vest, just helping people around. You can go to all kind of health facilities. I've been in Haiti after the earthquake with the field hospital. I've been in Bangladesh with the field hospital. I've been so many places. So all these places I use psychological first aid. And now we have the long definition coming up. So PFA is a method of, now I can't even remember it by heart, helping people in distress so they feel calm and supported and in coping with the challenges. The next thing is also important, that it assists in managing the situation and making informed decisions. Finally, the basis is caring about somebody in distress. And what is also part of PFA is actually to offer very concrete and practical help. So very often it's like in first aid, you see somebody, you give them a blanket because they're cold. Psychological first aid, somebody comes into the office because they want to find, they have lost the whereabouts of their relatives. That happens in all disasters. We lose contact with our relatives, and people sit and cry for hours, and you care for them, and then you can listen to them, because then they can begin to start talking. So we do have a lot of what we do is we have different steps: look, listen, link. So we look for what has happened, information about the situation. We look out for ourselves. That's step number one. So you actually need to be very good at calming techniques. You know how to regulate your own arousal, your own emotions, and you need to help others to regulate their emotions. So there's a lot of that, because in one way, PFA is quite simple. It's caring about somebody. Yet we all know how when somebody comes in, and this is an exercise I do in my classes, I would do a ball throw. So what is a useless response you've heard when you told somebody about your problems? So I would say, Bonnie, catch the ball. Bonnie will catch the ball, and she will say, that will go over. Time will heal it all, or whatever. So actually, it's tricky to get out of your used ways of saying, si Dieu le veut, ça va passer, that will be all right, or just pray some more, or whatever it is that your useless response is. Because sometimes just listening to people, and you all know this, listening to people in really serious distress can be really taxing on yourself. So before I go on and talk a bit about resilience and what we do right now, because we do a lot, the Red Cross Red Crescent, we do run a lot of hotlines, phone lines where people call in. So they would call in, for instance, during the uprising, or during the unrest, civil unrest in you could say Hong Kong, you could take Belarus. People will call in, and they can have anonymous support because they're afraid, they're worried for somebody they love who was at the demonstrations. Or we do have Corona hotlines in many countries. We also run phone circles, you know, the usual. So we do train people on how to do it remotely. So for instance, if in an online training, you would go to breakout rooms, and then you would not have the camera on, and then you would do remote PFA, practicing giving remote PFA where you can't see each other, where you're not sitting together. So before going on, I just want to put it into a bit of a frame, what it is we do, because these principles that we always work with in disasters, and you can think of these principles in any kind of crisis, whether it's your own personal life, whether it's a team you're leading, or whether you're going to the field and I am going to set up a safe space for children in a camp with 1,000 people. So we always work on the basis of something that is very, very interesting, the Hopful principles. So Hopful and his associates made meta-studies of what helps to prevent mass trauma from developing after huge emergencies. So they found these 5 principles. And when listening to you today, you have actually touched upon some of them. So principle number 1 is safety. So the first principle, and I see Bonnie nodding, is actually, if I have to do PFA with somebody, they need to be safe. It's like with the first aid. So they need to be in a safe area. And I've actually been supervising volunteers in Greece where they hadn't thought about making the interview rooms safe. So actually there was a case, not with my volunteers, but with somebody else, where a man disclosed that he was a homosexual, and then he was gang raped night after night after that. So there was no protection, there was no safety. And we need also to think about safety as feeling safe and being safe, and that you can also be safe but don't feel safe. So we need to have these techniques to help people navigate and find out what's the difference. Some people don't see that the situation is unsafe. They feel safe and it's unsafe. That's also not very helpful. So safety is number 1, and we do establish these safe zones. We do establish safe spaces for children. We do have lots of training and materials on that, where they come and play. The next principle is, and I know them by heart, is calming. And calming is much more than just feeling calm. It's knowing about your own reactions when you get excited. What can you do? I'll give you a bizarre example. No, I'll give you a good example first. So could I ask you to imagine that you're chewing gum, like me? Out, I still see you chewing. So you may feel that what happens when you chew is that you get the saliva going. Because when you're afraid and worried, your mouth will dry up. That's one of the things that happens. So for instance, in a hospital, if in a field hospital, I can hand out chewing gum. With children, I can maybe blow soap bubbles. So if I blow soap bubbles, I will have this deep breath and long out breath. So I know I need to be able to know many, many different calming techniques so that I can actually talk to people in PFA, and they need to learn them so that they can calm themselves. And the chewing gum, I use that when I see my acupuncturist and when I see my dentist, because I don't really like neither, and I find it really helpful. So a strange calming technique for some could actually be, for some children that are traumatized, they will have a whole array of things that they can then choose. So one thing a child could actually choose is to pick on a chili and chew it, to really become aware of the here and now and get out of, if they're going into, they're remembering something really unpleasant, and they kind of get out of the here and now. So calming techniques is really part of what we do. And doing this remotely is quite interesting, and you can do it. And then we do the self and collective efficacy. It's a really, really important principle, meaning that it's, when it comes to the first aid, it's relating to this one, assisting somebody making informed decisions. It is not the helper making the decision. It's about taking the time to listen and helping people that can act. And I'll get back to resilience. in just a little while, because part of acting is actually getting control. And one thing we lose when we are in disasters is control. And this is what happens. We need to get control back. So anything you can do to get control is important. And give you another example. We call it self and collective efficacy. So in Haiti, in Pakistan, I'll give you an example from Pakistan after the 2010 flood. I would come out with my team and I would be the madam, of course. So I would have my Red Cross thing around my neck and they would say, Madam, we have no school. Everything was gone in the village except maybe one building. Oh, you have no school. No, madam, could you build a school? And I didn't have money to build a school. It was not for me. So my job is simply to say, let's think about this, and then get the community to think. Can I get some of the decision makers of the community together? So what can you do if you don't have blah, blah, blah? And then usually you did have a building, you had a mosque, or you had a school. Do you have a school teacher? Yeah, the school teachers are still here. So my thing is, I need to get them to start reasoning again because they're completely out of it and shocked. So to get their own agency together. And what we also know is that when school starts again, this is when children start to, when children start to be better, parents start to do better. So we need to start the schooling. And that's part of the problem with Corona right now, of course. And connectedness is the principle that we hear a lot about this during Corona, right? You need to stay in touch. You need to have a cup of tea online or coffee online. And it's really important because the single most important thing for us is actually our connections. And when disasters happen, people don't get out their phones and call the Red Cross and say, come on, I need a tent or I need somebody. They call their loved ones. I mean, that's number one thing we do. So we need to enforce the connections, and this is something we do, for instance, by building community centers, and they can be very primitive, they can be a tent, but people come together. And for instance, in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar, when colleagues were running a center, it was run, 1 hour sessions, slots, and it was full from morning till night. And for instance, you would have the faith leaders, and you would ask them, what is it you need? And they would say, to get the self and collective efficacy going, you just don't tell them what they should do. They will tell you, we want to read newspapers because there's no internet and there's no phone connection in the camps. So they wanted to know what was going on in the world. That was quite interesting. So we took papers from the Cox's Bazar, the town, out into the field. So hope, and I heard you talk about hope, and it's so inspiring and interesting because when people really lose hope, this is really a breaking point for so many. So when we need to get this, it's not a spiral, but it's all intertwined. What's the word? It's like, it's all woven together, but we need all of this. I need to go on and talk about resilience here. So resilience and coping is strongly related, and this is all part of what we do in psychological first aid. So if I have a call, I will be working on, and I will comment on the sense of purpose, the meaningfulness. So for instance, I volunteer because I know it's important. I know that it gives me resilience. It's good to volunteer because it makes us stronger and it gives us a sense of altruism, purpose. We're doing something for somebody else. And that's very, very strong. So on the way to recovery, we always know that the people are humanitarian workers and people like yourself, we will be more resilient because we're doing things for others. It's a very strong factor. And the altruism, reminding people nowadays, this is what we do, that they are keeping apart because they're helping curtail the spread of the coronavirus. And then optimism, that's actually difficult because it's like saying to people, you can't just say stop moaning. You need to let them, of course, be sad, unhappy, grieve, but at the same time you need to listen for what is it that they've been doing well and comment on that. And we need to sometimes learn them to look at things. What could be other explanations for what you're going through? Have you thought of it other ways? We're not pushing people and say, you know, it's for the better. Nothing, everything that happens is for the best, because of course it's not. And then we work with the acceptance. It is a bad situation, but what can we do to accept it? And we have had a lot of people worrying during Corona, and the anxiety is going up. You may know it, but anxiety is up, and this is huge research into almost all the countries that you've mentioned, Bonnie. This is going up 7-fold since 2017, and depression's going up. And we do know that after Corona, whenever situation ends, it will go up. So we're not seeing the worst yet. So this is what we need to be prepared for. How can we support people after Corona? So we do a lot about, we do worry, and I will share my screen so you can see some of the training material. I'm just going to show you a worksheet I have from a recent training on psychological first aid. So for instance, we usually work with worry times, asking people not to worry all the day. It's a classical, but then to say what is your worry? Whenever there's a worry coming up, deal with it in the sense that you note it down, and then note when do you want to do something about it. And if it's a worry that you can't deal with right now, should I quit my job and go back? This is just a case that I created. Then you can see I'm gonna work with this in my worry time later tonight, or when it is. So we also, so that's the worry template that we're training people to use for others, so that they can actually cope with the issues they're having instead of worrying about them. So that's one way to deal with anxiety. And then resilience is also learning about adversity. So I'm going to show, you can both see here, it's post-adversity growth. Yeah, learning from adversity here, or post-adversity growth. It was one of the questions that was posed to me. And two of our colleagues have done some research into what people say after they have been through horrible ordeals that none of us would wish to go through. And they would usually say, it made me stronger. I had Corona. Here. I was down with Corona, and I'm not saying I want it for anybody else, but somehow it was really strange that it was also, in a way, now I've seen it, and it wasn't that bad. And everybody I knew who had it did not have it that bad. I don't want to infect anybody. I don't want to wish for anybody to have it, but there was something to be learned. So we talk about what people have learned from adversity. And you have to be really, really careful. You can't talk about it until 6 months after. But there's a training in my training material. You can here see that there is learning from a difficult situation. So in trainings, it's about training people to learn from a situation that was difficult, and you tell them, don't pick something that is extremely difficult. I was just doing classes I also teach at the psychomotor education, and we did an exercise, similar situation they had control in, situation they had no control over. So what is the difference? But they have to choose a situation that does not make them completely scared, upset, anxious. So these are some of the things that we work with in psychological first aid. And I'll stop screen sharing. Stop share. So the final thing, of course, and that is we build the body systems, we build the body support. And what we do in all my trainings, and my trainings are a bit special because most of them are for psychological support for emergencies. And we pair them with a body from the beginning to the end of the training. And they have interviews at 3 times during the day, following a specific template. Because we do know that body systems comes out of the safety industry, and it's all about making it safe to speak up, because you know that you can speak your mind. Because we know that in emergencies, disasters happen because people don't dare speak up. There's so many examples of that. There's very interesting books written on it, where people do not speak up. So body system is one way to ensure that we can relate to another. And we know that bodies in our trainings, they follow each other for years afterwards. They form in 4 days, they form really close relations. So that was my 30 minutes. Thank you very much. And I think that I'm allowed to take some questions, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And what you've shared is the foundation of the work many of us do. So for some, it was validation. For others, it was a wonderful primer and sharing the importance of stabilization. We've
Yeah.
talked about that throughout the day. And in some cases, going into communities, as Bushra has done in Kabul and address the just desperate need for economic security and stability. What we talked about in Iraq with refugees struggling just to survive, and then on the other end of the spectrum, the what we call the post-traumatic growth, or as you termed it, the strength that we gain.
Yeah. PTG is the same. It's just another, yeah.
It's just fantastic. So this was wonderful, and I would love to take any questions that our attendees may have, or any thoughts.
I was going to just ask a question. I found your presentation very informative and very interesting. Thank you so much. I'm sure you're familiar with some of the aspects of what TAPS does. And as you were talking, it reminded me of one of the programs that is very central to the organization. That's our peer mentor program. And it touches upon two of the things you mentioned. The altruism aspect, which is exactly what peer mentors do. It's the idea of being there for somebody else and what that can do for that other person. Not only for the other person, but also for the peer mentor. And then you mentioned the buddy system and the buddy support. And I just wanted to ask you if you could expand a little bit on that buddy system, because it sounds very similar to what the peer mentor program is at TAPS. And I think we're both on the same page as it relates to the post-traumatic growth that Bonnie was talking about, and how that can really be beneficial and meaningful to people.
So I think that's really very perceptive. And in my mind, a peer mentor would be somebody who has gone through some of the stages and processes, and then are taught how to mentor somebody else. And that's very powerful. I mean, look at AA, what they're doing. It is so powerful. Peers, and this relates to the fact that we do know that the single most important factor for us to overcome post-traumatic stress or PTSD, that's social support. The single most important factor to prevent it is social support. And once you have a buddy that you can call, if you're on a mission, I've called my buddies when I've been in really dire situations. I've been bombed, I've been, and you've been it too, how challenging that can be when you sit there and you're just waiting for the next, or when you're in earthquakes. Oh my God, I'm so scared of earthquakes, that you can call a buddy. So what we do with the buddy system is they're more peers than peer mentors. So it is about training them to have a certain conversation. So in the morning, it is the "Are you ready?" conversation, as we call it, with different steps. It can be from "Have you slept well?" So that they get to know each other, and they get to know each other, how each other functions. And then in the lunch, how are you doing? Is there any support you need from me? And at the end of the day, what we do include is what self-care do you need to do for the rest of the day? What self-care plans do you have? And that's really important, because that's another thing I talk a lot about. Self-care is something we always say: sleep well, eat well, exercise, read, don't watch too much television, don't drink, don't smoke, and that doesn't help anybody. So it has to be something that is that's a lived reality for us. So having that kind of decision making on it on a daily basis is really important. So buddies consult each other, The last story I remember is that was a year ago. I met somebody I had trained some years back, and they talked about how they had through WhatsApp communicated about somebody staying in a very difficult mission. I can actually say it was in Yemen, so it was quite challenging, and making the decision whether to quit ahead of time or not. So that was done with a buddy, and I've always had a buddy when I've gone out and found it extremely helpful. So I don't know if, yeah, I think you do probably the same, yeah.
Yeah, and it also made me think of, I mean, you mentioned a lot of, but I think that buddy system also, relates to the connectedness you're talking about, allows you to be connected to somebody too, and be in the dark spaces and the safe space to safety. You talked about feeling safe and being safe, and who better to feel safe and be safe with than somebody that you refer to as a buddy or a mentor, or somebody that you can trust.
So just to give you another example, it's got nothing to do with, but the last training we did some weeks back, online training that went really well, was that the buddies created the certificate for each other. So we had them all shown, and then they photographed them and sent them on WhatsApp, and it was such a moving ceremony. And then we sent the official certificates after people had completed the online evaluation. So it really made very strong links, and I generated a lot of love and care and trust. And people didn't know each other. They were just from I can't remember. We had another training came from Peru to Australia, and from Greenland to Kenya in the same training. And they were all up at the same time. Somebody went to bed when somebody got up. So that's yeah, I can really encourage it. So we developed this protocol for interviews.
Yeah, I have a question also. I really appreciate your presentation, Suzanne. I just want you to expand more on applying self-care and using this psychosocial first aid on the self, because most of us here, both at TAPS and all of us in this conference, we provide these services to people in our community that needs it. And sometimes we tend to suppress our own needs, just to cater for the next person, and at the end, it kind of like robs us of both our whoever I would present, we're helping, and for us also. So I'd like you to, to expand more on this and how best we could, follow it up.
Oh, that's very moving, Augustine, if you're saying this, because I know it's a reality for most of us when we've been in the field and we work so much. I did a workshop for some delegates recently, 2 workshops, because I didn't want too many in it. And I did something that I really like. I had prepared a presentation, I had prepared exercises. And then in the end, I just said, there's 3 things about Corona. It is, we don't know when it ends. That's there's the uncertainty. We don't know how it, blah, blah, blah. And there were 3 uns, and that gives us anxiety. So we're all working very hard. So I would like to hear from you now. Can you raise 1 finger if you know how to self-care, you do it? Can you raise 2 fingers if you know how to self-care and you don't do it? And what happened is that we had this very moving discussion about why people didn't do it. So what keeps you from self-care? So I think that it's useless when we, trainings have, you should do this, you should do that, because we have very good reasons. Part of altruism, we want to feel good, we want to be good, we want to be brilliant, we want to be praised. Whatever the motives are, and we need to look at them, and then you need to also allow yourself to be selfish, and talk about what is it that makes you not self-care. We had a very moving experience in one of the groups, because there was somebody from Lebanon, and this was maybe it happened in August. This was maybe 2.5 months after, and somebody was just like so devastated. and there was nothing I could say that could make it go away or be a good situation. So we just shared it. I said, let's just sit here for 2 minutes together, just being with each other. Sometimes, you know, it's about a personal thing. So I think that peer support is very good for self-care. I don't know if it makes any sense to you, Augustine. I also train a lot on what you can do as psychological first aid after emergencies. So, for instance, after earthquakes and stuff, and I practice. I do practice everything I train. Yeah.
And we also have a term, reciprocal peer support, that the strength you gain from providing care to another.
Yeah.
That it is empowering, inspiring, and really can fill our soul.
Right. So right on. Yeah.
I think we had a few other questions.
Would they be in the chat? Compassion, fatigue. Yeah. Yeah, there are many words for it. Yeah, burnout, compassion, fatigue. Yeah.
I'm so grateful for your presentation and for sharing everything that you've learned and all the things that you're going into to areas and implementing regardless of where it is, that the importance of recognizing that people are people, and the best thing to do for people is to get them connected, get them that form of social support. So my question is two parts. One, how do you identify those that are going to be best suited to be mentors, to kind of serve in that role with others that are more vulnerable? And then two, how do you make sure that you are also providing that support for the mentors themselves?
Yeah. No, really brilliant. So my role in the organization as of now is not so much to choose. So I am part of a committee to interviewing somebody, but usually I'm not the one doing the HR to sending people out. But when I have been training, because we're the one doing the psychosocial support in emergencies, sometimes I see somebody and I just, you just know that person is so talented, and I've been fortunate, and they have been outstanding. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of them. So coming to, where could it be, Niger, whatever, and seeing that person in the field and training together, it's been marvelous. So I think that you need to want to be in this field. You need to have a good background. And I'm something called a psychomotor therapist. Doesn't exist in many countries. Some of you from France may know it. A psychomotricienne. That's me, and I love it. And I think it's wonderful. So when I heard about this kind of work, I immediately just knew that's what I want to do. So it's also you know, I was chosen to be it. So interesting that it felt like it. But when you say about supporting the carers, and this is where a lot of organizations are not doing enough, and neither is my own, if I think of IFRC, but the people sending out delegates is the National Society. So what we can do is I can talk about it. We can develop materials. We can train. We do have a training caring for volunteers. We do train. We do have a very good material in PFA Action Group. PFA, because of the debate around debriefings, we call it Group PFA after critical events. So we train on that, and we have a lot of material. And what we find is, I remember so many places I've been where people stand up and they talk about they were assisting in a plane crash 10 years ago, or there was an ambulance, I remember, ambulance responders in Lebanon, they had been bombed. That was also, I think, that must have been 10 years ago as well. And they talk about it like it just happened. So sometimes you can still land in situations where you can give the support. And what struck me most about the ambulance drivers in Lebanon was that what they said, if only we had a letter of appreciation from our organization. So sometimes it's such tiny things that the organization need to do. When Osama bin Laden was killed and I was in Pakistan, that they called and asked how we were doing. It was just something, wow, they care for us. So I think that HR or the organization sending out, sometimes they need to realize it's not so much they need to do, but they need to do it. And then we as humanitarians, when we are on missions or when we are in organizations, we can do a lot by supporting our peers. So if I'm on a mission, I would give a talk on, it could be, I've written a book on sleep, so I would give a lecture at lunch on sleep. And then somebody will come and ask me a lot of follow-up questions so that they know that I'm a go-to person. If they have some issues, I can support. I'm there. So these are just, we can all do something.
Oh, thank you so much. This was tremendously useful. It was validating. It was inspiring. It really has helped us so much. And thank you for being a part of our day and giving us the training. We've recorded this session, so we have many more delegates from all corners of the world who are looking forward to watching this at another time when it's more in line with their time zone. So we appreciate you being
Cool.
with us.
Yeah. And all the material mentioned is on our website, and we do have lots of also caring for staff and volunteers, lots of podcasts and stuff. So it's pscenter.org. So thank you for inviting me and for allowing me time and for validating the work that you are doing, that I can sense and hear that you're doing.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to staying in touch with you and just continuing to lean on the extraordinary work that you have done. It's absolutely perfect. So this was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.